What if the man sitting quietly in the corner of a struggling diner wasn't just a customer, but a millionaire in disguise, watching every move? What if the waitress serving coffee with a tired smile was about to change his life forever, without even knowing it? This isn't just a love story. It's a story about truth, resilience, and a secret that will turn everything upside down. Stay until the end, you won't believe how it all unfolds. It started with a lie. Not the kind meant to deceive with malice, but the kind told in silence, with purpose. The kind wrapped in humility and hidden in plain sight. Nathan Reyes, billionaire, CEO, and founder of one of America's most successful restaurant empires, stood under the rusting sign of his own failing location on the edge of Charleston, South Carolina, dressed like someone who didn't belong. Or maybe he did. His hoodie was worn thin, the jeans slightly torn at the knees. No one would have looked at him twice, and that was the point. He wasn't here to be recognized. He was here to see. Nathan didn't believe in audits, spreadsheets, or sanitized quarterly reports when it came to truth. He believed in the floor, in the scent of stale fryer oil, in the hum of broken ceiling fans, in the eyes of the people who served and smiled without reason. That's where the real answers lived. And something in this place, this particular restaurant, had been off for months. The complaints had started like whispers, missed orders, rude staff, unfriendly atmosphere, until they grew into a storm. But when his regional managers couldn't give him anything more than shallow excuses, Nathan made a decision that surprised even himself. He would walk in through the front door. As no one. What he didn't expect, was to find everything he wasn't looking for. It was late afternoon when he stepped inside, the bell above the door giving a half-hearted jingle like it, too, was tired of being there. The air was dense, heavy with the scent of fryer grease and old mop water. The interior looked like it hadn't been updated in years, laminated menus curled at the edges, napkin holders sticky to the touch, a menu board missing 3 letters. It wasn't just the restaurant that felt forgotten. It was the people. He watched from the entrance as a waitress darted from table to table, her ponytail bouncing, sneakers scuffing against the cracked tiles. She was barely keeping up, her movements urgent but practiced, muscle memory in motion. She passed by him briefly, her arms full of dishes, and said, "Give me 1 minute, I'll seek you." No one else came. No manager. No host. No staff greeting him at the door. Just her. Exactly 60 seconds later, she returned with a smile so disarming that it knocked the wind out of him. "I didn't forget," she said with a warm breathlessness, pointing to a windowside table. "Come sit. That one gets the last of the sun this time of day." He followed her without a word, noting the way she balanced 2 waters in one hand and wiped the table with the other, apologizing as she did. "My name's Emily. If I seem a little scattered, it's because I kind of am today," she said with a half-laugh. "But I promise I'll take good care of you." "Emily." He repeated it silently. She handed him a menu, smudged at the edges, and walked off to attend another table where a man in a blazer was already waving his empty glass. Nathan glanced around the dining room, taking in the scene. 3 wait staff. 22 guests. 1 Emily. He ordered something simple. Coffee and a sandwich. Enough to keep him seated. Enough to watch. What unfolded over the next hour left him speechless, and furious. He saw Emily refill glasses before being asked. Apologize for food she didn't cook. Smile at rude customers. Diffuse tension with softness. She noticed when a teenage girl dropped her fork and brought her a fresh one with a folded napkin like it was the most normal thing in the world. She pulled chairs for elderly guests. Remembered allergies. Dodged insults. Absorbed chaos. She did it all while Victor, the restaurant's manager, barked orders from behind the kitchen past like a man guarding a castle that had already burned down. He never once thanked her. He never once helped. At one point, Nathan overheard him sneer into the walkie clip to his belt, if she drops one more plate, I'm cutting her hours. Nathan's grip tightened around his mug. He had seen bad management before. But this was different. This was willful neglect. And it wasn't just killing the business. It was killing her. When Emily returned to his table, her hairline glistening with sweat, she gave him the same smile as when he arrived. Coffee still hot? It's perfect, he said. But what he meant was, you don't have to pretend with me. She nodded and moved on before he could say more. After his meal, he left a tip 4 times the bill and wrote a message on the back of the receipt, "You're doing more than anyone sees. Please don't stop." She didn't read it in front of him. She didn't chase him out the door. But something told him, she would remember. Nathan walked out into the dusk, his heart pounding harder than it had after any boardroom presentation or acquisition deal. He sat in his car, engine off, and stared at the entrance. What had he just witnessed? This wasn't about a failing restaurant anymore. It wasn't about profits or Yelp reviews. It was about the woman inside, holding up an entire ecosystem by sheer force of will. He didn't know her story. Not yet. But he knew one thing. She was the reason this place hadn't collapsed. And maybe, just maybe, she was about to become the reason he changed too. He returned the next day. And the next. And the one after that. He watched Emily work through exhaustion, through emotional bruises invisible to others. He watched Victor continue to berate her in hushed tones that only she seemed to hear. He watched customers treat her like furniture and others treat her like a miracle, and she responded to both with grace. But more than that, he started noticing the cracks in her smile. The flinch when she heard Victor's voice. The weariness she carried like a second skin. She worked through pain. Through silence. Through sacrifice. And no one said thank you. Except him. One Thursday evening, when the crowd had finally died down, Nathan asked if she ever took breaks. Emily raised an eyebrow. Do I look like someone who knows what a break is? He chuckled. Fair enough. She took a seat across from him anyway, stretching her fingers. So, where are you really from? She asked. You don't seem like a guy just passing through. He hesitated. I'm, between things. Figuring stuff out. Huh, she said, nodding slowly. Aren't we all? And then, just like that, she stood and walked away, tossing her apron over her shoulder. But for a moment, in that sliver of honesty, something passed between them, something unspoken and electric. That night, Nathan didn't sleep. He pulled up her employee file, restricted even from most corporate staff. He didn't do this lightly. But he had to know. Emily Dawson. 29, single mother. Hired 2 years ago. Clean performance history. Positive customer feedback. Part-time student. He stared at her photo. She looked tired, even then. But her eyes. They hadn't given up. He shut his laptop, heart thudding. This was no longer an undercover inspection. This wasn't even a mission to save a location. This was something else entirely. He had found someone extraordinary. And the world had forgotten her. But he wouldn't. Not anymore. Nathan Reyes had built an empire from nothing. He'd sat across billionaires. Flown private. Closed deals that made headlines. But this woman, this waitress, this Emily. She was about to teach him what it truly meant to build something that lasts. He just didn't know it yet. And neither did she. But they were both about to find out. Together. In the days that followed his first visit, Nathan Reyes found himself drawn back to the Charleston restaurant with a sense of purpose that startled him. He told himself it was business, that he needed to understand the operational failures firsthand. But that wasn't the whole truth. Not anymore. It was her. Emily Dawson, the woman who had somehow remained luminous in the shadows of neglect, had left an imprint on him. Not because she smiled through exhaustion, or because she could handle 3 tables and a screaming toddler while remembering to refill a coffee cup, but because there was a quiet, invisible battle she was fighting. And she was losing it with grace. Every morning, Nathan slipped into the same booth near the window, a habit he could no longer pretend was coincidental. He always arrived just before the rush, before the chaos swallowed the calm, and waited to see her emerge from the kitchen in her faded black sneakers, apron already smudged with flour, and eyes betraying the kind of fatigue that didn't come from one bad night's sleep, but from years of carrying more than she could. She never looked surprised to see him. Maybe part of her was becoming used to the idea that someone noticed her consistency. Maybe she liked it. Maybe she didn't. Back again, she'd ask. Can't stay away, he'd respond with a shrug, keeping his tone casual, hiding how deeply invested he'd already become. As the days turned into weeks, Nathan began to observe not just the service or the systems but the delicate ecosystem inside the walls of that restaurant, and how utterly dependent it was on one woman's resilience. Victor, the manager, remained as poisonous as ever. He hovered over the staff like a storm cloud, ready to burst at the smallest misstep. The other employees worked quietly, with the kind of weariness that came from knowing your efforts would never be enough. They didn't smile unless Emily did. They didn't speak unless spoken to. They functioned, barely, under a regime that smothered enthusiasm. But Emily fought for light in every shift. She greeted every customer like they mattered. She made tired coworkers laugh when they burned out. She tucked away her own exhaustion in the creases of her apron and pushed forward. Nathan watched her lift morale like it was part of the job description, though he knew it wasn't written anywhere. That kind of leadership came from somewhere deeper. From within. He couldn't help but wonder what the rest of her life looked like. What weight she carried home. What dreams she had locked away for later. It didn't take long before he found out. One evening, after the dinner rush had subsided and the hum of conversation softened, Nathan caught her in a rare moment of stillness. She was wiping down the counter, her eyes glazed with distraction. "You okay?" he asked. She blinked, then smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, just tired." "Work tired or life tired?" She paused. "Both." He didn't press, but she kept going, a surprising crack in her normally guarded tone. "My daughter's sick. Nothing serious, just one of those bugs going around daycare. She wanted me to stay home tonight. Said, 'Mommy, you always leave when the moon comes.'" Emily exhaled. "I said I'd be back before she fell asleep. But I won't be." Nathan's heart twisted. "How old is she?" 5, Emily said. "Her name's Lily. She thinks I'm some kind of superhero." A pause. "I try to be." He couldn't find the right words to respond. "Not then." She turned away to finish cleaning, but Nathan sat frozen. Lily. A child waiting at home. A mother working into the night. No help in sight. He couldn't stop thinking about them, not that night, or the next day, or the one after that. He imagined Emily, hunched over bills after her shift. He imagined Lily coloring on the floor, waiting for footsteps at the door. He imagined what it cost Emily to smile when everything inside her might be unraveling. So he started doing something about it. Small things, at first. He spoke with his operations team anonymously, requesting improvements to the kitchen equipment and common areas. He authorized budget for additional staff coverage. He funneled these changes through corporate directives, never revealing they were his ideas. When a stack of new chairs arrived, the old ones hauled away without explanation, Emily stared at them for a long time before whispering to a coworker, "Victor would never approve this." Nathan, seated in his usual booth, just smiled behind his coffee. He continued to visit, but now with a growing sense of frustration. Because no matter what silent good he did, it wasn't fixing everything. Victor remained a shadow, his cruelty efficient and targeted. He undermined Emily at every opportunity, whispering sarcasm in her ear, assigning her the worst shifts, blaming her for any complaint, no matter how baseless. And still, she showed up. Nathan noticed how her kindness began to feel heavier. Her energy dulled around the edges. Her voice, though still warm, lacked its early brightness. She wasn't quitting, but she was wearing thin. And he didn't want to watch her disappear beneath the weight. It all came to a breaking point one night when an irate customer, entitled and loud, began shouting over a minor order mistake. Emily apologized, offered a solution, but he kept escalating. His voice rose. Victor emerged from the back, took one look at the situation, and sided with the customer. "Maybe if you were paying more attention, Emily, this wouldn't happen," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You want us to keep losing regulars over your slip-ups?" Emily's face froze. Her hands trembled as she held the tray. She turned away quickly, retreating to the kitchen, but not fast enough for Nathan to miss the sting in her eyes. He stood up, walked over to Victor, and for the first time, dropped the mask, not of his identity, but of his restraint. "Do you ever consider that treating your staff like they matter might actually improve this place?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "You a consultant now? Sit down. It's none of your business." Nathan didn't move. "You're wrong. She's the only reason this business is still breathing." Victor scoffed and walked off, dismissing him with a wave. Emily emerged moments later, eyes red-rimmed, but posture composed. She saw Nathan standing and mouthed, "It's okay." But it wasn't. That night, Nathan knew what he had to do. Not just for the restaurant, not just for the business, but for her. He pulled out a legal pad in his hotel room and began sketching out a restructuring plan. A staffing proposal. A new vision, one centered on empowerment, respect, and people like Emily. He stopped halfway down the page. What would she say if she knew who he really was? Would she feel betrayed? Would she think all the conversations, all the little moments, were lies? He feared the answer. And still, he couldn't stop. Because what she gave to that restaurant couldn't be repaid in tips or compliments. She was fighting for her child's future with no backup, no support, no promise of recognition. She wasn't just keeping the doors open. She was setting the standard for what those doors could mean, for community, for comfort, for compassion. Nathan couldn't fix her life. But he could try to make it easier to live. And maybe, if she let him, one day he could be part of it. Not as a customer. Not as a CEO. But as someone who finally understood that beneath the surface of ordinary days lived extraordinary people, and one extraordinary woman who had changed everything. He folded the legal pad and placed it beside his laptop. Tomorrow, he would begin again. But not as the man with a secret. Tomorrow, the truth would come. And nothing would ever be the same. The days were changing. It wasn't something anyone could point to on a calendar or in a shift report, but something deeper had begun to stir in the quiet spaces between table service and late-night cleanups. Nathan felt it every time he stepped inside the Charleston restaurant, a shift in energy that had nothing to do with decor or staffing. It was subtler than that, like the change in the air just before the first spring rain. And the center of that shift, the quiet revolution no one saw coming, was still Emily Dawson. He noticed it one afternoon when she laughed too easily, as though the weight on her shoulders had lightened by even a few ounces. A regular customer complimented her service, and instead of brushing it off with the usual humility, she accepted it. Genuinely. Gratefully. Nathan realized, in small and almost imperceptible ways, she was beginning to believe something better might be possible. And that belief was as fragile and sacred as new growth breaking through concrete. He wasn't ready to reveal himself yet, but his efforts behind the scenes had started bearing fruit. The equipment upgrades, improved inventory flow, and secret budget allowances for extra part-time help were slowly transforming the restaurant's infrastructure. Victor hadn't caught on that someone else was pulling strings, but the staff noticed. And so did Emily. "I don't know what's going on lately," she told Nathan one night after the dinner rush. "But things feel different. I don't feel like I'm drowning anymore." She was seated across from him, sipping tea with tired eyes but a peaceful expression. "Maybe you were never meant to drown," he said gently. "Maybe you were meant to rise." She gave him a long look, and for a moment, Nathan thought she might ask him who he really was. But instead, she smiled, a full, unguarded smile, and changed the subject. "Lily drew a picture of a bakery last night," she said, laughing softly. "She said she wants to open a cupcake shop with me. Mommy and Me Muffins, she's calling it." Nathan leaned in. "That sounds like a bestseller already." She even drew a window with little hearts and frosting dripping down the sides. "I swear, if she ever sees a place like that in real life, she'll never let me work anywhere else." He watched her closely. There was a wistfulness in her voice, but also something else, a cautious kind of hope, the kind that hadn't had permission to bloom in years. "What if you made it real?" he asked. She blinked. "What?" "The bakery. What if it wasn't just a drawing on a refrigerator?" Emily laughed, shaking her head. "I can't even afford new shoes without stress, Nathan. I'm barely paying rent. That dream died a long time ago." "Dreams don't die," he said. "People just bury them when no one shows up to help carry the weight." She fell quiet. The truth of his words seemed to echo between them. Later that week, he returned to his hotel room and spread out papers on the desk, financial reports, local permit information, real estate brochures. He even sketched a rough blueprint of a cafe with a play area, pastel walls, and a menu handwritten in Lily's crayon-like scrawl. He wasn't building a franchise. He was planting a future. But he knew better than to give it too fast. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Trust needed time. So he kept giving in smaller ways. When Emily mentioned that Lily's school was hosting a charity bake sale and she didn't have time or supplies to participate, Nathan anonymously sent a care package of baking essentials to the restaurant the next day with a note, "For the best cupcakes Charleston hasn't tasted yet." Emily's eyes welled up when she opened the box. She didn't know who it was from. But that night, she baked until 2 a.m. and delivered 3 dozen mini cupcakes to Lily's class the next morning. "They said they tasted like joy," she told Nathan the following evening, pride flickering in her voice like a flame rediscovered. That same night, he asked her a question that changed everything. "What would it take for you to believe in yourself again?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window as if trying to see the answer somewhere in the city lights. "I used to think I was strong because I could survive anything," she finally said. "But lately, I wonder if maybe strength means letting yourself believe something good can actually last." Nathan was silent. Because he knew, she wasn't talking about cupcakes or the restaurant anymore. She was talking about him. They sat together, wordless for a long while, the air between them thick with the weight of things neither of them dared say aloud. It wasn't quite romantic yet. But it was personal. It was real. And then came the turning point. The restaurant had been selected to host a weekend community event, a collaboration with local businesses. Victor, uninterested in anything that didn't raise immediate profit, had dismissed it entirely. But Emily saw opportunity. "It's not just about sales," she explained to the staff. "It's about people knowing we're here. That we care." Nathan watched as she stepped into a role she had never been given but had always deserved, leader. She organized booths. Scheduled staff. Baked cupcakes with Lily and designed flyers after hours. She handled supply orders, coordinated donations, and invited a local children's choir to perform. The night before the event, Nathan passed by the restaurant late. Through the window, he saw her setting up folding chairs alone, music playing softly from her phone. He stepped inside without a word and began arranging tables next to her. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied. They worked in quiet synchronicity, and when they were finished, she looked around the room and whispered, "I can't believe this is happening." Nathan turned to her. "It's happening because of you." The event the next day was a success. The restaurant buzzed with joy, and for the first time in a long time, the atmosphere felt alive, not from polished surfaces or new menus, but because it had heart again. Customers lingered. Kids laughed. The air smelled like cinnamon and possibility. Emily moved through it all like she belonged in the center of it, and Nathan, for once, allowed himself to imagine what it might feel like to stand beside her fully, without pretense, without disguise. That night, after the last guest left and the chairs were stacked, Emily sat on the back step behind the restaurant, her legs stretched out, a paper cup of lemonade in her hand. Nathan joined her. "You've changed this place," he said. She gave him a look, skeptical but amused. "Hardly." "No," he insisted. "You've changed it. And you've changed me." The words slipped out before he could stop them. She didn't flinch, but she also didn't respond. Instead, she stared at the stars, as if trying to find answers written in constellations. Then she turned to him and asked something he didn't expect. "Who are you, really?" He froze. "I mean, you're always here," she continued, voice calm but intent. "You notice things no one else does. You say things that sound rehearsed, but not in a bad way. Like you've thought about them too long. And somehow, you always show up exactly when someone needs help." Nathan wanted to tell her. He almost did. But then she smiled, that tired, tender smile he had come to associate with all things honest and fragile. "Don't answer," she said softly. "Not yet." And he didn't. Because he knew the truth would come soon enough. And when it did, it would either break everything between them, or plant the final seed that would grow into something unshakable. But for now, they sat in the silence of a changed place, two people who had found each other not in moments of glory, but in the quiet, necessary work of surviving, and maybe, just maybe, beginning to live. It was time. Nathan had rehearsed the moment more times than he could count, but every version of it ended the same way, with her looking at him not like someone she trusted, but like a stranger. He stared at the message on his phone again. The mandatory meeting was scheduled for the next morning, a quiet line of text sent through the company system, simple and vague. But what it would mean was anything but simple. This wasn't just a staff update. It was the collapse of the disguise he had been wearing for weeks. The wall between the truth and everything he had built with Emily was about to come down, not brick by brick, but all at once. That night, he barely slept. He walked the streets of Charleston like a ghost, each step heavy with the possibility that what he had begun to feel for her, and what he believed she had begun to feel for him, might not survive the truth. But it was time. The next morning, the team gathered in the restaurant's cramped break room. Mismatched chairs scraped across the floor as employees shifted in their seats. Murmurs filled the air, theories swirling. Emily sat quietly near the back, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of lukewarm coffee. Her eyes met Nathan's as he stepped into the room, and something in them flickered, curiosity, yes, but also the beginnings of something more fragile, fear. Nathan stood at the front, his heart pounding beneath the crisp lines of the suit he hadn't worn since arriving in Charleston. This wasn't the hoodie-clad regular anymore. This was the man behind the curtain. "My name is Nathan Reyes," he began, voice steady though his hands trembled slightly at his sides. "Some of you may already know me. But I suspect most of you don't." Silence fell. "I'm the founder and CEO of this restaurant chain." The room didn't gasp. It went still. Completely still. "I came here disguised as a customer not to spy or deceive, but because I didn't trust the filtered reports. I needed to see the truth for myself." And what I found was more than I ever expected. No one moved. I saw a team struggling without support. A manager who used fear instead of leadership. And I saw one person, one woman, holding this entire place together without ever being asked. He didn't look directly at Emily, but he didn't have to. The moment she realized he was talking about her, the color drained from her face. Victor, standing near the door with his arms folded, scoffed. So what? You slummed it for a month and now you want applause? Nathan's voice dropped. What I want is change. Real change. And that starts now. He turned to Victor, no longer hiding behind the calmness he had once used to navigate their brief, bitter exchanges. Effective immediately, you're being relieved of your duties. You failed this team and created a toxic environment that contradicts everything this company stands for. There is no room here for cruelty disguised as authority. Victor sputtered, shocked. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, Nathan said, unwavering. Security will escort you out. HR will follow up with your termination paperwork. Victor laughed bitterly as he grabbed his things. Good luck. You'll regret this. But no one stopped him. No one defended him. Not this time. When the door finally shut behind him, the silence broke in murmurs and sighs, a room exhaling for the first time in years. Nathan turned back to the staff. There will be changes. Structural ones. You'll get a say. Your voices will matter again. But today, I want to offer someone here a new beginning. He looked straight at Emily now. Her face was unreadable. Emily, I'd like to offer you the position of manager. The room shifted again. Chairs turned. Heads swiveled. Emily blinked. Once. Twice. She didn't speak. You've led without the title. You've carried this place without recognition. And I believe you are exactly the kind of leader this team needs. Not someone who rules with fear, but someone who serves with strength. Still, she didn't move. Instead, she stood abruptly and walked out of the room. Nathan followed after a moment, heart in his throat. He found her in the alley behind the restaurant, arms wrapped around herself, eyes wet but angry. You lied to me, she said, voice hoarse. All this time. You sat in my section, listened to my stories, watched me struggle, and you didn't say a word. I wanted to tell you, Nathan said. I almost did. But I was afraid. That I wouldn't trust you, she cut in. You were right. Her words hit like stone. I trusted you, Nathan. More than anyone in a long time. I let you meet my daughter. I told you things I don't even tell myself. And all that time, you weren't who you said you were. I didn't lie about what mattered, he said. Every word I said, every moment we shared, it was real. You have to believe that. She shook her head. I don't know what to believe right now. Nathan stepped closer. Then believe this, I see you. I see your strength, your resilience, your kindness. I see how you lift others when no one's lifting you. That's why I came back every day. Not for the restaurant. For you. She looked away, her expression cracking under the weight of too many feelings. Why me? Because you reminded me what leadership should look like. What humanity feels like. You woke up something in me I didn't even realize had gone quiet. The wind rustled, carrying the sounds of a city that didn't care about boardrooms or broken trust. Only the two of them existed in that moment, suspended between honesty and heartbreak. I need time, she said finally, voice breaking. I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. I'll wait, Nathan replied. For as long as it takes. She didn't respond. She just turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the middle of the space she had once filled with so much light. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The team took the news of Victor's dismissal as cautiously hopeful. There were questions, hesitations, and conversations that stretched long into the evening. But Emily didn't return. Nathan didn't push. He didn't call. He didn't show up at her door. Instead, he stayed late after hours and scrubbed the graffiti off the back alley wall himself. He swept the front patio. He replaced the flickering light bulb in the kitchen, not because it was his job, but because he wanted to earn something the right way. The next morning, the sun broke through clouds like a promise. And Emily walked in through the front doors, her hair pulled back, her shoulders squared, and something different in her eyes. "I'll take the job," she said simply. A wave of relief surged through Nathan, but he didn't smile. "Not yet. But I'm doing it my way," she continued. "I want weekly meetings. Team input. A space where people feel safe, not just useful." He nodded. "Whatever you need. And I want to rebuild this place from the inside out," she added. "Not just the walls. The culture. The spirit." "You already have," he said quietly. She turned to walk toward the back office. Then stopped. "And Nathan?" He looked up. "We're not okay. Not yet. I know. But maybe someday." He watched her disappear behind the door. And for the first time in years, Nathan Reyes, billionaire, CEO, builder of empires, felt humbled in the most human way. Because for all the power he wielded in the world, the only thing that mattered now, was whether one woman could believe in him again. And for that, he would wait. Because some things, the right things, are worth rebuilding from the ground up. Even trust. The days that followed were not filled with fireworks or grand reconciliations. There were no sweeping declarations or sudden shifts in rhythm. But something was changing. Slowly. Deliberately. Emily showed up to work every morning, her name now stitched into a manager's uniform she never asked for but had come to wear with a quiet pride. She carried a notebook with pages full of handwritten ideas, revised schedules, customer care policies, staff mentorship rotations. She posted a whiteboard in the break room that read, "Your voice matters. Let's build this together." Beneath it, team members began leaving sticky notes, thoughts, frustrations, encouragement. For the first time, they felt seen. The restaurant itself seemed to breathe differently. Guests lingered longer. The air felt warmer. Music played again, not because someone told them to, but because someone cared enough to notice what was missing. And through all of it, Nathan remained nearby, not as the man in charge, but as someone learning to follow. He worked quietly in the background, handling logistics, removing obstacles, approving changes without hesitation. When Emily wanted to move the staff meetings to Sunday afternoons so weekend closers could participate, he rearranged regional schedules. When she asked for child-friendly menu options, he pulled in development chefs to help. She led. He enabled. But the distance between them remained, not icy, but cautious. The kind that lingers after broken trust, even when the pieces have been swept up. They spoke often, professionally. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes their eyes lingered a little too long. And sometimes, when the restaurant emptied out late at night, they sat across from each other, coffee in hand, unsure of how much space was left between what they had been and what they might still become. It was one such night, weeks after the day of truth, when Emily finally spoke the words that had lived unsaid between them. "You know I didn't take the job for you, right?" Nathan nodded. "I know. I took it for Lily. And maybe for me, too. I needed to prove to myself I could build something that didn't fall apart." "You have," he said. "Every day." Emily looked down at her cup. "And I didn't stop caring about you. I tried to. I thought it would be easier. But it wasn't," Nathan finished for her. She looked at him, then, not like a manager looking at her employer, or a woman looking at a man who had once lied, but like someone standing on the edge of something new. It wasn't, she whispered. And that was all they said. A few days later, Nathan invited Emily and Lily to a neighborhood farmer's market near the water. It was a quiet Sunday morning, and Charleston had dressed itself in spring, cobblestones warmed by sunlight, the air scented with honeysuckle and cinnamon bread from nearby vendors. Lily ran ahead, her laughter echoing off the buildings. Emily trailed behind with Nathan, a content kind of silence between them. They stopped at a booth selling children's books, and Lily held up a story about a girl who builds a bakery out of tree branches and candy wrappers. She says she's going to build her own one day, Emily said, watching her daughter with a mix of amusement and tenderness. Maybe she will, Nathan said. Maybe you will too. Emily turned to him. You really think so? I know so. That evening, he brought them to an empty storefront on a quiet corner in downtown Charleston. The windows were dusty, but the bones of the space were strong, exposed brick, wide counters, a little nook perfect for a play area. I bought this a few years ago, Nathan said, unlocking the door. I didn't know what for. I think I do now. Emily stepped inside slowly. Her footsteps echoed in the open space. Lily twirled in the center of the floor. There's nothing here, Emily whispered, as if afraid to disturb the moment. There's everything here, Nathan said. If you're ready. She looked at him, stunned. You're serious? I'm not offering you a favor, Emily. I'm offering you a partnership. You build the dream. I'll build the foundation beneath it. For a long time, she said nothing. She just stood in the middle of the empty shop, one hand pressed to her chest as if holding her heartbeat still. I'm scared, she admitted. What if I fail? You won't, Nathan said. But even if you do, you'll fail forward. With grace. With purpose. And not alone. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she reached for Lily's hand. What do you think, sweetheart? She asked. Lily grinned. I want pink frosting walls. Emily laughed. And then, with a nod so small only someone watching closely would notice, she said, okay. Let's build something. They called it Lily's Corner, part bakery, part cafe, part dream made real. The walls weren't painted with frosting, but with soft pastel blues and warm yellows that caught the morning light just right. The counter held cupcakes with names like Sunrise Surprise and Second Chance Cinnamon. A chalkboard near the door displayed hand-drawn messages from customers, most of them written in the rounded letters of children. Emily worked the early shifts while Lily played nearby in the reading nook. Nathan came by most afternoons, not as a CEO or investor, but as someone invested in them. In what they were building. In the quiet miracle of possibility. Months passed. The bakery became a local favorite. They hosted cupcake classes for kids, community nights for single parents, and donation drives for local shelters. It was more than a place to eat. It was a place to belong. And somewhere in the rhythm of rising dough and opening doors, Emily and Nathan found their way back to each other. One evening, after closing, Nathan stayed behind to help clean. Lily had fallen asleep in the corner with a picture book resting on her chest. Emily stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. You stayed, she said. He dried his hands on a towel. I told you I would. You gave me space when I needed it. And you didn't push. I couldn't, he said. Trust isn't a gift. It's a garden. You water it or you lose it. She turned to face him, her voice softer now. And love? That's a choice, he said. One I make every day. For you. For Lily. For this. She walked toward him, slow and certain. Then make it now, she said. And he did. He kissed her not like someone claiming, but like someone returning, to a place that had waited for him, quietly, faithfully, without demand. A place that felt like home. They married in a garden behind the bakery, surrounded by wildflowers and the people who had once sat in her section without knowing her name. Lily walked down the aisle throwing petals, her cupcake apron tied neatly over a lace dress. At the reception, Emily took the mic and said just one thing. Sometimes, the person who changes your life isn't the one who walks in with a plan. It's the one who stays, even after the truth. Nathan took her hand, eyes full. And when, a year later, they held their newborn son for the first time, Emily whispered into his tiny ear, "You are proof that love rebuilds. That dreams do come true. That nothing beautiful is ever wasted." Their story wasn't perfect. But it was theirs. And it was enough. There are stories that entertain, stories that teach, and then there are stories that stay with you, the kind that seep beneath your skin and settle in your heart long after the final words have been spoken. This was one of them. What began as a secret investigation by a wealthy man disguised in ordinary clothes unfolded into something far more profound than a business decision. This was the journey of a man rediscovering his humanity, a woman reclaiming her worth, and a child whose innocence became a light strong enough to guide two broken hearts toward healing. Nathan Reyes didn't walk into that failing Charleston restaurant looking for connection. He wasn't searching for love, or redemption, or even answers. He walked in chasing a problem. He wanted data. Accountability. A solution. But what he found was Emily Dawson, a woman who had been holding up a world that was never meant to rest on her shoulders alone. She wasn't a headline. She wasn't even listed in the quarterly performance reports. But she was everything. She was the proof that grit survives long after glamour fades. That grace still shows up when no one says thank you. That even in the smallest corners of forgotten places, brilliance blooms quietly. Emily was more than a waitress. She was a mother, a fighter, a leader in hiding. And what made her extraordinary wasn't just how she moved through exhaustion with kindness, it was that she chose to keep showing up, even when the world gave her every reason to walk away. For Nathan, watching her was like remembering who he used to be, the kid who started his first business out of a food truck, fueled by passion and hope. But somewhere along the way, in the boardrooms and brand expansions, he had lost touch with the soul behind the service. Emily reminded him. But their journey was never meant to be easy. When the truth came out, that Nathan was not just another customer, but the man behind the very walls she worked in, the rupture was deep. Emily felt betrayed. Her trust had been given freely, and now it hung in question. And yet, she didn't retreat. She didn't crumble. She stepped forward. She accepted the manager role not to repay Nathan's gesture, but to take back control of her narrative. She built from the inside what had never been offered to her from above, a place where people mattered. A team that believed in each other. A business that ran on values instead of fear. And in doing so, she inspired not just the staff, but Nathan himself. Their healing was not immediate. Trust, once broken, does not return with apologies. It returns with presence. With consistency. With time. Nathan gave her that. And Emily, in her own quiet way, offered a path back, not to the man he had pretended to be, but to the man he wanted to become. Their bond deepened not through dramatic gestures, but through small, repeated acts of belief. He showed up. She let him. He waited. She rebuilt. And when the moment came to dream out loud, it wasn't Nathan who offered the dream, it was Lily, with her cupcake drawings and belief in magic. Together, they took an empty building and turned it into something extraordinary. Lily's Corner was never just a bakery. It was a promise kept. A second chance honored. A child's vision made real through the work of adults who finally saw themselves not as broken survivors, but as builders of something new. And through that dream, they created a community, one that celebrated resilience, welcomed imperfection, and proved that success isn't measured by profit margins, but by the lives you touch along the way. The final chapter wasn't a perfect fairy tale. There were still long nights, financial stress, moments of fear. But there was also laughter, warmth, and the kind of love that grows slow and deep, the kind built on honesty, shared values, and mutual growth. Emily and Nathan didn't just fall in love. They earned it. They chose each other. Again and again. And when they stood at the altar behind the bakery, surrounded by those they had served and inspired, they weren't just celebrating a marriage. They were celebrating a transformation. Of two people. Of one community. Of a life rebuilt from brokenness into something profoundly whole. The lesson: love that leads, strength that listens. So, what do we take away from their story? It's not just about a millionaire finding love. Or a struggling single mom being rescued. It's about something far more real and universal. It's about seeing people. Truly seeing them. Not for the job they do or the uniform they wear, but for the fire they carry. The silent battles they fight. The quiet kindness they show when no one's watching. We live in a world where it's easy to walk past the Emily's. To complain about a delay. To dismiss someone's tired smile. To assume struggle means weakness, when in truth, it often means someone is carrying 10 times more than we ever realized. This story teaches us that leadership isn't a title. It's how you treat the people with the least power in the room. It teaches us that love doesn't always begin with butterflies. Sometimes, it begins in the messy trenches of work, responsibility, and exhaustion, and grows in the soil of shared respect, honesty, and vulnerability. It teaches us that trust is not built by words, but by presence. And it teaches us that dreams, no matter how buried, are never dead. They're waiting. Waiting for someone to believe again. How to apply this in your life? So how can you take this story and make it matter in your own life? Maybe you're like Nathan, successful on the outside, but disconnected from your own humanity. Maybe it's time to step back, look closer, and ask not just what's working, but who is working, and how you can support them. Maybe you're like Emily, stretched thin, underappreciated, and afraid to hope again. Maybe it's time to remember that your voice matters, that leadership lives within you, and that it's okay to want more than just survival. Maybe you're like Lily, full of imagination, reminding the world that love and laughter are the ingredients to something magical. Wherever you are, remember this. It's never too late to rebuild. To forgive. To lead. To start again. Not just in business. In love. In life. Because the most powerful changes don't come from the top. They come from the heart. Thank you, and an invitation to continue this journey. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in these characters, felt something shift inside you, or found a reason to believe in kindness again, then we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to this channel. Not just for more stories like this, but to be part of a community that values humanity, healing, and hope. Every like, comment, and share fuels our mission to bring you content that doesn't just entertain, but leaves a lasting mark. So if this story touched something in you, let us know in the comments. Tell us your favorite moment. Tell us what it made you feel. Tell us how you're going to see the world differently tomorrow. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you don't miss the next story that just might change the way you see love, life, and yourself. Because sometimes, one story is all it takes to start a new chapter. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.